Thanks so much for joining us. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap. And I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host. I created this show now, we're in our sixth season, to share resources that help women navigate career and life challenges and to know they're not alone. Each week, I invite a guest to help me co create a show to encourage women to become more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and indeed in their lives. So, if you're inspired by something that you hear today and you want more of the same, subscribe, comment, share, and be sure to check out the show notes below to connect with my guest and me. So, as I often do, I have a question for you to start. Are you a woman who has settled for less than you deserve? Or have you held yourself back because moving forward just feels really scary, like you don't know where to head next? We want to help you today take back control and learn about small shifts that can bring massive changes. So, my guest is Sonia Miller, and she is a fulfillment and empowerment coach with a background in education, business, and social work. And she specializes in helping accomplished professional women to keep settling for less, who keep settling for less, to find the satisfaction they've dreamed of without wasting time or working harder, even when that doesn't feel like it's possible. Sonia draws from her 27 years as a teacher, leadership trainer, and retreat facilitator to empower women with the skills to succeed. She guides them in reducing anxiety, connecting with joy, finding their purpose, up-leveling their professions, and increasing their confidence. Now, who doesn't want more of that, right? So Sonia is on a mission to show wise women that the skills that allow them to succeed, listen to this, are not the same skills that will enable them to flourish and thrive. And by uncovering and developing these unique skills, women can create a path to fulfillment and success. I know you're going to love to hear what Sonia has to share with us. So let us bring her on screen with us. Hello, Sonia.
Hi, Maria. It's so great to be here.
It is so nice for you to join us. We are happy to have this conversation today. I can't wait to dig into this conversation. So let's just get started. I said that you are on a mission to show smart women how the skills that allow us to succeed are not the same skills that allow us to thrive. So tell us what the difference is.
One of my favorite things to talk about. The way, after all of my years of working with women, and I count myself as, my clients are a version of me. It's really come down to understanding the difference between what I call a doing model of power versus a being model of power. And I have two symbols that I like to draw upon to really illustrate the difference. The doing model of power is when we are working and navigating life and approaching our goals and dreams, much like the hunter. So the hunter has a target in its sights, and the hunter works really hard and uses a lot of brain skills and a lot of action and a lot of planning and uses its tools. And it will often be in a state of lack until it gets its target, because it wants something it doesn't have. And so those doing skills serve us well. And that's often what allows us to succeed in work, with money, and getting things done. We operate much like the hunter. However, that same skill set of doing does not allow us to thrive, because it actually often causes us to suppress our human beingness. And so the being skills are where we get to tap into what allows us to thrive and flourish. I'd like to say fulfillment is something that you feel. You don't achieve fulfilled, you feel fulfilled. You feel full and filled with the feelings of joy, of peace, of enoughness, of abundance, of prosperity, of freedom. These are feelings. And in order to experience those feelings, they don't come from getting the target. They actually come from something that arises from within. And so the tree is the symbol of this model of power. And the tree is able to simply be. It examines nothing, it hunts nothing, it doesn't think about anything, it doesn't pursue anything. It's just being present, standing in its place, and it receives all day long from life itself. It receives the sun and the atmosphere and the water and the minerals and the visitors who spread its seeds across the lands. It never has to promote or market itself. The birds come and they eat the fruit, and the people come and they pick the flowers and they spread the seeds across the land. The winds come. And so it's receiving all day long by being a being. And we actually are beings. We are human beings, but we operate like human doings. And so many of us are malnourished in that being skill set. And so we've over relied on the doing model of power because we have succeeded, because we've gotten validation and payment and acknowledgement. And it's allowed us to do really well, but it can only take us so far. And that beyond place is the thriving place.
Oh, I love that. That beyond place is the thriving place. Wow, that's powerful. All right. So, in this podcast, we have had guests who have talked in the past about, the being and doing, and I'm a doer from way back. Um, I have I have to really remind myself about being more. I have to remind myself to do that. So I would love to, let's peel back the curtain a little bit on you. I would love to know where your passion about this comes from. Can you share a bit of that story?
Yes, absolutely. So I've traveled the journey myself in really understanding the difference between being and doing. And also, really, the passion comes from a place of pain that I began. So I grew up, I like to say, I was sort of raised as the eldest male. And my father was the dominant parent in my life, even though my mom was always there. And we have these, I like to say for myself and for all of us, that when we are malnourished in our being skills, it's not a flaw and it's not our fault, but we are products of our environment. And so whether it's our home environment or the time in history where we live, or we're one of the women who are riding on, many of those waves of the women's movement, we've accessed tremendous opportunities that weren't available before because of those who preceded us. But we entered into environments, often in corporate America, that were based in these worlds that were made by men for men. And so we learned the ways of masculine energy. And there's tremendous beauty and value and power in masculine energy. And there really hasn't been a fully embodied, a fully expressed feminine model of power or being model of power in these environments. I think that that's still what is coming into the forefront. And so I was one of these women. I did everything that my father sort of guided me to do, to be self-sufficient and independent. And I got this wonderful message: you can do anything, you can be anything. And yet there was that being part of me that was malnourished. And so I got my business degree in finance. I was trading stocks and bonds right out of college. I was an assistant vice president at the age of 24, and I was achieving a lot and really successful and making some good money. Meanwhile, personally, I felt like I was dying a spiritual death. I had an eating disorder. I was very, very lost. And it was really kind of in this moment of sort of awakening while I was literally standing in the trading room floor, where I asked myself, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had checked off all of the to-dos that I was supposed to fulfill as a dutiful daughter and a responsible citizen. And I was very unhappy. And so that questioning arose for me. And that's when I realized that everything I'd been pursuing lived in my outer world, and in my inner world, I was unhappy, and it was time to start to explore that terrain. And so I gained the courage. My unhappiness was greater than my fear of change. And so I decided to explore that. And I dove into what I call the invisible world of psychology and spirituality and metaphysics and quantum physics, and how our consciousness creates our reality, and everything that it took to heal from an eating disorder, which was very much about learning how not only to feel my feelings, but how could my feelings ever be productive, powerful, actually the source of my power? And as I started that journey where I started to go beyond just my intellect, which I'd gotten lots of validation for, but emotions, my intuition, and I really started to understand the difference between power and control. That the hunter
Mm.
and me accomplishing a lot and being successful was a lot about control. And I was also trying to control myself and my body and my feelings and my eating, because I didn't have a relationship with my being or my feelings. And as I started to tap into that, I realized, oh, power lies within, and control over the physical realm, that's a completely different thing. So we can control things and achieve a lot, but we won't necessarily feel powerful. I've often seen this for many of my clients, is that we have these incredible resumes, but we don't feel as powerful as we look on paper. And that starts to tap into the realm of imposter syndrome, because that inner part isn't really getting any validation or valuing.
Right. Power comes from within. You're dropping some really special nuggets along the way here. So power comes within, from within, and control is something very, very different. And being in control does not necessarily make you feel powerful.
Yes, exactly. One of my favorite topics to explore and talk and teach about is this idea that your presence is more powerful than your productivity.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I work with a lot of women who have, as you just said, incredible resumes. They know how to do a lot of things,
Yes.
but they don't know how to be a great leader in the environment they choose to be in, for just the reason that I think you are touching on here, because they really don't know how to authentically be and come from that feminine energy that allows them to be. And it's not that men can't also figure that out. There are many men who have.
Mhm.
But I think this is a uniquely woman problem because of the way we've been raised in in a world created by men for men, and finding our little niche in it,
Mhm.
and figuring out how to reprogram the environments that we're in so that we get to fit better and feel better.
Yes. You know, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is I've become really clear for myself, and this is a kind of my soapbox, is that we've outgrown fighting for our rights.
Mm,
Because and what happens is we fight for our rights because we think that that's what power is, which is getting control over these external circumstances that feel unjust or imbalanced or unfair. But fighting is just more of the doing model of power. And not only that, the deeper aspect of our power is that our consciousness creates our reality. So when we are fighting against something instead of standing for something, we're giving all of our attention, our consciousness towards what we don't want, which gives it more power and life. And so the solution is, don't worry about what's happening in the doing model power of trying to fix that or control it. Nurture the being, nurture your presence, discover how to bring more. That's the tree trunk expanding in value and presence, and the roots going deeper where you become immovable because you are nurturing, nurturing, nurturing rather than fixing and controlling. And so the masculine or the doing might be up here, the feminine is down here. We don't have to bring that down. We just need to raise up the feminine. And then we have the common good that we can create through partnering and balancing the doing and the being within ourselves, which then gets reflected in the outer world where there's more balance and harmony instead of the fighting. It's all about elevating and bringing balance to what is currently here.
I think that's such a powerful point you just made. We don't have to bring down anything.
Right.
We just have to elevate our own sense of power and what that feels like for us. And it's individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone feels that power differently.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the skills, the being skills that are different than the doing skills. Let's talk a bit more about those. Tell us exactly what are those skills?
Okay. So I think that one of the best ways to start learning what the being skills are is to understand what they're not. So we know what the doing skills are. And so the being skills are always a version of the complete opposite of the doing skills. So the doing skills, back to the hunter, thinks a lot of thinking, a lot of figuring out, a lot of examination. The being skills still use the mind, but we use the mind instead to become aware. And one of the very first skills that I teach is to stop. So when you're doing, when you're caught in problem solving, when you're trying to figure things out, when you're making plans, when your whole body is tense because you're so busy, stop. That's the very there's two things that I teach are like the kind of the foundation of all the being skills. They are the power of stopping and the power of space. So when you stop and you become aware that you're busy, that you're thinking, that you're over functioning, that you're trying to control something, the minute you stop and become aware, you've now activated your greatest power, which is the power to choose. And instead of just reacting to circumstances and trying to fix and control, we now can start to choose how we're going to respond. Now, learning how to respond in empowering ways, for some of us, we actually just need to remember to stop. And it's actually what you were talking about, Maria, which is, sometimes we have to remind ourselves, this skill is a skill that we practice for the rest of our lives, because the doing model of power will teach you that you go out and get it and you're done. It's concrete, it's finite. I captured the prize, I got the goal. The being model of power teaches us that we nurture ourselves for the rest of our lives. We never actually get there. We actually develop a relationship with ourselves that is much more present, much more accepting, much more embracing, right? And so what happens is we'll get lost in doing and we'll return home, and we'll get lost in doing and we'll return home for the rest of our lives. But in order to practice that, we have to first recognize when we're in doing mode so we can stop and choose to shift to being. So that's the first skill. The other one that's really important is space, the power of space, because we are all comprised of spaces, the space of the mind, the space of the heart, the space of our bodies, everything. When you're in being mode, you start to look at things in terms of spaces. And the tree is the embodiment of a space or a series of spaces that's always receiving. I like to say you cannot receive anything new if your spaces are full. So a bowl that is full can receive nothing new. A bowl that is empty, there's space to receive something new. And space, by definition, is an invitation. And I love to illuminate this because once we think about it, we realize how this is so. If you've ever cleared off your kitchen counter and you have a nice, spacious counter, how long does it take before it's covered in junk mail and keys and purses and things? Empty space, invite stuff. You've cleared out your garden. You got rid of the cat droppings and the stones and the leaves that blew in. You've cleared it out. You've got all this space. How long does it take for either more of those twigs and branches to blow in or for the flowers to grow? There's no room because there's space. You clear out your closet. You've done a big purge. You got all this room. How long does it take before that space gets filled up with all the stuff that the house brings in, right? So space by definition is an invitation, and life is always offering kindness. The question isn't, how do I receive the fulfillment that I want? The question is, what am I receiving right now? And when we are in hunter mode, the space of our mind is filled with problem solving, and our bodies are filled with whatever isn't being honored because the feelings can't move. We tend to push down the feelings so that we can do more. And in our relationships are spaces. Are we conscious of what our relationship is currently receiving to be present to that? Or are we trying to control things so that things go our way or we get the behaviors that we want? So stopping and space are two of the aspects of being that we get to really explore.
And it sounds so simple. And for a lot of people, it's not. Something I've been working on for years. I call it the power of the pause. I remind myself to just pause when I'm doing so much.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that the power of space is an invitation
Mm-hmm.
to allow. I was reminded just recently, this week, that things were not going my way. And in terms of the schedule that I had for myself over the last couple of days, and things got canceled or rescheduled, or and they had the potential to throw me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Until I remembered the power of the pause.
Yeah.
And just to allow, just to wait and see how things would unfold. And it was this morning that I woke up and I recognized that actually the way things panned out for me the last couple of days were for my best good.
Mm.
And everything got done that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was less stressed. So it happened. So allowing things to just taking a break, taking a pause, stopping,
Mm-hmm.
and then giving it space.
Yes. Yeah.
So important.
So important. And, back to the contrast between the hunter and the tree, or the hunter and the gatherer, the hunter operates from intention. I've got that target. I want to make that happen. Right. And so it's actually all about closing in on the space. It's about focusing and zeroing in. Again, there's value to that. We get a lot accomplished.
Sure.
We produce outcomes. We're successful. The tree, however, the more space, the better. And what that does is, instead of the hunter being the sole provider that makes everything happen, that's what exhausts us, right? The tree represents that life is the provider. But you cannot receive the kindness that life is always offering if there isn't that invitation, that spaciousness for things that are better than we could conceive of on our own to be presented, to be revealed.
Yeah. I love the analogy of the hunter and the tree. For me, I'm a very visual person. That really speaks to me. I can see exactly what you're talking about when you talk about, the hunter is so focused on the doing. And it occurs to me as you're talking that we are both things.
Mhm. Yes,
And we need both things.
absolutely.
But what I think where we benefit the most is when we find the harmony between them.
Yeah. Well, you've used a word I use all the time, which is that word harmony.
Yeah,
If we are women who really are called to make an impact in the world, and we can make, you know, not just women, all people, but the people that I find are the most powerful are the ones that really value both sets of skills. And that's
yeah,
a key piece. It's really valuing, not just valuing the being skills, but understanding how it can be so incredibly productive and so much easier. It's so simple because we are human beings. That's actually what we are. But
right.
we have that part of us has often been malnourished or we have forgotten. But as we value those skills, nurture those skills, raise them up and elevate them and empower them, then the most powerful humans are those that access the doing and the being skills at will as needed for the situation at hand. That's a certain level of mastery
Yeah,
that can only come from really valuing both and practicing both.
yeah. And they do take exactly that practice,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I think we are conditioned to be human doers,
Mhm.
and the power of being is something we have to learn, and that we have to practice probably more in
Right.
order to raise the level of our being to that level of our doing, and then watch them kind of merge, as you say, based on the circumstances, and we figure out which one will serve us best.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we've already said this isn't always easy for people. So tell me what you think are some of the challenges that people like us, smart women, right,
Mhm.
that they encounter when they start to deepen this skill set.
Yes. Well, the most common thing that I hear as they become they see and feel the logic of this, they have enough frame of reference to say, okay, this makes sense. I want to explore this. I want to go here. And one of the biggest ones that comes up is once we start practicing being skills, which require being instead of doing, is all we practice are awareness practices. That's what we do. It's because all of our power is in, as you said, the power of pause or the power of stopping, shifting from doing to being, from thinking to feeling, from action to experience. And so one of the hardest things is unlearning the struggle that we've learned. I always say that some struggle in life is natural. It's a natural part of life. The Buddhists say, for example, pain is inevitable. There is pain in life, but suffering is optional. And so the struggle that's natural is a baby being born, right? Or, a little chicklet, pushing out of the egg, or a little sprout coming out of the earth. Sometimes there are storms in life, and there's a natural amount of struggle that's just part of life. It's the wholeness and the duality of life. But much struggle is learned when we have an overdeveloped doing skill set and a malnourished being skill set, because in the absence of those being skills, when we don't feel powerful, what do? We go back to what we know and we work even harder. And that hard work that's based in trying to force or make things to happen causes us to struggle unnecessarily. So the first main challenge is just beginning to unlearn the learned struggle that can, like you were saying, the conditioned struggle. And so when we stop and we breathe and we pause and we explore some of these awareness practices, the mind, for us overdoers and overfunctioners, will say, well, what do I do? I'm supposed to do something. I don't feel powerful. And it takes showing up in practice. and a little bit of faith at first, which is, I'm always just kind of like, just keep showing up. And so I've actually come up with a counterbalance to the Nike statement, just do it, that model. The being statement, the being motto is just show up, just show up, just show up, just show up. So you show up for yourself and you show up in your space. Hopefully you become encouraged to create, and I encourage this a lot, a space that's for you. One chair in the house, one chair in your space where you can maybe just have maybe some flowers or a candle or music that's just for you, a sacred space, right? And so you keep showing up for yourself by making time and making space to simply be literally 5 minutes. And for women who are super, super, super busy, and I see this a lot, I'll have some clients come to me and they'll say, I want to do this. I want to do this. This makes sense to me. Let's practice this. And then they come back a week later for a phone call or a class or something like that. And they'll say, oh, I didn't do my exercises. I didn't do it. So one of the things I love to do is try to find just a little crack of light where there's a space in their life, and then open up the space even more. So what we practice a lot is claiming micro spaces throughout the day. And those micro spaces are just what we've talked about. You notice you're super busy, you're breathing shallow because you're just trying to get things done. You stop, you breathe, just take 3 breaths. That helps you go from thinking to feeling in your body. That's a micro space. And then just breathe. And those little micro spaces will create a little bit more and a little bit more, and space is the invitation. And then as you become able to have a little bit more space, you might be a little bit more intentional about it. You say, I'm going to wake up in the morning 10 minutes earlier, sit up straight in bed, and press play on a guided meditation from a teacher that I like. Or open up a book that has some quotes that inspire me. So you're inviting what you want for the day by nurturing your mind and your body and your heart with things that are going to nurture your being versus your doing. So I would say those are some of the main struggles at the beginning as we're learning to unlearn struggle and move into nurturing being. It's really the awareness that it's an unlearning process.
That's so well put. The unlearning. And because we've already said that ultimately it's a blending of a sense of harmony between the doing and the being when you've achieved mastery of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, it's learning, unlearning what causes you to be such a doer.
Yes.
And what happens when you are in that process of doing. So many things come up. I can almost feel what it felt like for me when I was in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes get back into it. I feel anxious.
Mm-hmm.
I feel not terribly productive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm multitasking and not doing anything well. There's so many things that can come up when we are in this frame of doing without the balance
Right.
that comes with the being.
And with that, one of the things so I learned about being and doing many years ago in my studies, but I had this latest body of work that's all about teaching how to receive, understanding that getting is not the same as receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And receiving is really the being skills. One of the things I realized, I actually had kind of this disguise part of this moment. I was sitting at my desk, much like what you're talking about, and I was just way over functioning, way overdoing, just doing. But my brain knew better, but my being hadn't fully digested what we're talking about today. And I had a conversation with myself, and I had Sonia, you've got to stop this. You know better. You know you're overdoing. You need to be. And I was having this argument with myself where I said, yes, but I've got stuff I got to get done. How is being going to help me with that? Literally, that was the conversation.
Mhm.
And I just kind of put out this question to the universe or life. And I said, all right, what is the power and the value of being? How is this going to help me accomplish the things I want to accomplish? And I had to simply sit because the answer wasn't there. And that's when this whole download came to me. I saw the tree and then an understanding of, wait a minute, the tree receives all day long and it's super productive. It creates fruits and leaves and flowers for people and it feeds me. I mean, it's like, what's happening? And that's when I became a student of the tree. I mean, that's really where I need to see how that, I'm a human being, how does that translate? And one of the first things I realized is stopping the doing is not the same as the power of being. You know, we can stop all of the activity, but that's just part of the equation. And then there's this whole other part of ourselves that we get to explore and nurture that really allows us to do less and receive more.
Mm.
So that piece
Yeah.
really felt relevant to what you're talking about. Like when it's just,
Yeah.
we know we're doing, but it's tricky at first because there really has been a part of us that's been malnourished.
And you say, I think you hit the proverbial nail on the head when you asked yourself that question, how is stopping what I'm doing and being more
Mm-hmm.
going to get what needs to be done? How
Right.
am I going to, because there's still things that we have to do, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
And
one
I
of the
think,
things, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just I just was thinking that if we could just give ourselves some space,
Mm-hmm.
what happens for me when I do that is that I think differently and things become clearer to me.
Right.
And when I go back to doing, I have a new idea. I have a new approach.
Mm-hmm.
When I love this Wayne Dyer quote. I use it so often that I think it applies here. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
So when I stop, and I don't think you can do that until you stop what you're doing, become aware, and think about it differently.
Yeah. And in my world, you've just described exactly how it works. The stopping created the space,
Mm-hmm.
and your being received the insight of a
Yeah.
new way of looking at it. So
Yeah.
life gave you that, but it couldn't have given you that until you turned off the thinking brain, stopped, and then shifted into spaciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're so right. You
Yeah.
are so right.
Yeah.
All right. So I am sure that this is somewhat obvious, your answer to this question, but maybe not. I'm going to ask it anyway. What kinds of results can women experience? Let's say, it's a woman like you and I, like you used to be, like I still am sometimes. I'm working at it. Um, but what kind of results can we experience when we really tap into these being skills that you've been talking about today?
Yeah. Well, I can say this confidently because I've been living it and teaching it for a long time. And I mean, the sky's the limit. I've seen, I'll tell you, one of the most concrete places, especially for, you know, really powerful doers. I've worked with quite a few women in leadership, C-suite executives, and women in sales. And one of the things I've loved to see, and I have a lot of salespeople and people who are heads of sales teams, is sales becomes not just more abundant and easier, more peaceful. So where sales have been blocked or clogged, the flow gates open up again. big sales fall in people's laps. I just interviewed a client about her experience with that because she actually heads up a team. And there's a certain piece about understanding, yes, sales ebb and flow, but the anxiety and the angst of always having to hunt comes way, way down. And is this partnership with life when you realize there's another way to approach sales. So sales, client, in business, everything, clients, creative ideas, solutions. I've seen people in corporate America who are having struggle with other people or their teams or being overworked. And it really requires, and it goes back to what you were talking about, like, how do I bring my presence as a leader versus that doer that's always driving and trying to make things happen? Well, when we are struggling in our, interpersonal relationships in business, there's this aspect of being present with yourself where you remove yourself and you don't just try to figure it out, but you come back to how you're feeling, being present with yourself. And as you do that, then you are in your relationships and also invite solutions. I have seen things just shift without people having to try anything in their team relationships and in their interpersonal relationships. I've seen pregnancies happen. I have seen movies be revealed in another country and music opportunities for creatives, engagements, marriages. I just interviewed a client. I was doing an interview series, a client who had really struggled. She called herself a compulsive dieter, and she had wanted to lose weight and she couldn't do it. And when she started to really shift from fixing herself and fixing her body to showing up for herself and nurturing herself with these skills, she's lost 50 pounds. They've stayed off. And it isn't just about, I work really hard and I'm always obsessing. She's at peace. She's at peace in her relationship with food. She found a way that worked for her. She found a way to exercise that worked for her. And it was the reason she wanted to coach with me in the first place, but she had to shift her entire approach. So we really changed our relationship to productivity and success and fulfillment, because all of the outer world possibilities, they happen, but also those inner world results of anxiety comes way down, and there's peace and there's freedom and there's self-acceptance. We're no longer trying to become enough by doing more, but we let go of this enoughness and instead feel our wholeness, because we start welcoming home those parts of ourselves that we were judging or shaming or rejecting.
Well, those are all certainly results that I think we would all welcome, given our particular circumstances. If we all just think about, what would we like to change? And maybe an approach like this could help us if we could stop being the doer quite so much and learn to be the beer, right? If that's a word, I think I just coined it. But you know what I mean. That the opposite of the doer, the human doer, is the human being, and we want to be more of that. So, what's one thing that women can start practicing right away?
I think the most powerful shift, and this is, I do want to say one more thing about the difference between how we produce results in the doing versus the being. The doing model of power, everything is obvious and linear. A plus B equals C. That's the problem solver, the project manager, and the hunter. If I set my sights on the target and I sharpen my tools and I follow the tracks, then I will hopefully ultimately catch the prize. So it's clear. The being model of power is not linear. I like to say miracles happen in the messy. And it's important to understand that, because we'll practice ways of being in awareness, and then results will show up in an inner level and an outer level, and we'll think it's just a coincidence. Okay. But it's not. You are actually nurturing your power where it lies within, and then results will show up. And so the reason I say that before I talk about one thing that we can start doing right away is to practice shifting, noticing when you're trying to fix yourself or fix or control a problem in the world. And instead, simply practice stopping, noticing, and see if you can nurture, like start to look at how can I nurture myself instead, and really just keep focusing on nurturing yourself, even if there's something happening in the outer world. If you have a feeling of anxiety, instead of like, what do I do to fix this anxiety? What do I do to get rid of this anxiety? You just stop and say, oh, hi, anxiety. I see you. You can be here. Bring your awareness back to your body. Breathe. Give it some space instead of trying to push it out. And every time you just ask the question, and just you can even use a willingness affirmation. I'm trying to fix myself. I'm trying to fix something. I'm trying to control. Stop. I am willing to nurture this instead. I am willing to see all the ways that I can receive solutions right now. Willingness is an invitation for easy solutions. Just keep practicing that shift from don't need to control anything. I'm willing to receive nurturing from life instead. And if you practice that shift, while you might think, okay, that's a nice awareness practice, whatever, if you keep practicing that, that's a very deep shift in consciousness because you're no longer resisting what you don't want. You're just letting it be here. That opens up a space. And don't be surprised if little insights, awarenesses, manifestations start to show up in your life. It's just what you said, the moment you stopped, a new way of thinking about a problem showed up. Things show up all the time. We might think it's a coincidence or you just got a lucky break, but know that that's you tapping into your power. Shift from fixing to nurturing.
Love that. There are no coincidences.
No, they're not.
No. And, we hear this all the time. It's probably overused, but life happens for us, not to us. If we're just willing, there's that word.
Yes.
If we're just willing to stop, take that pause, open the space, and be willing to invite whatever wants to come and see how it plays out for us. I think sometimes we're all just too impatient for things to resolve.
Yes.
And if we just exercised a bit more patience, then it would be easier for us to do what you're suggesting, which is to the power of stopping, the power of space, and the allowing that invitation to happen.
Yeah.
There's so much more that you could share with us. I know that's true. And we could talk about this for another hour, but we can't. And I usually end each episode with a quick tips segment. So help us with maybe 3 quick tips for us to take away today. You've left us with so much already. But what would you say if you were to wrap this up for us in a nice bow?
Okay. I would say really be willing to tap into some of the things that we talked about today already. So one is the power of stopping. That would be my number one. And it's really always the thing that I bring everyone to, including myself. Once you practice stopping, you now have choice. So the first tip is practice stopping. And once you stop, and here's what happens. Okay, once we stop, so you become aware, I'm overdoing, I'm overthinking, I'm overfunctioning, to stop. And tip number 2 is breathe. Your breath is your body's natural intelligence that activates all sorts of things that most of us, unless we have studied medicine or physiology, we don't even realize what happens when we breathe. This is scientifically backed. Okay, so number 1 is practice stopping. Number 2 is breathe. Once you breathe, bring your awareness from your thinking to the sensations in your body, the sensations in your body. And then the third thing is become an invitation by practicing willingness. Just think about what it is that you don't want right now, because there's probably something you don't want. If you're really, really forcing something, you either don't want to be late or you don't want to miss, you don't want something to happen, so you're trying to force something to happen. There's usually something that you're trying to control. That's the don't want. Identify what the don't want is. Identify what the opposite is. That's your do want. And see if you can phrase it as a feeling. Okay. It could be, I am willing, and then put it into a willingness affirmation. I'm willing to have time expand for me. I'm willing to believe that I'm going to be okay even if I'm late on this assignment. I'm willing to receive an answer from life or the universe. Um, I'm willing to feel safe under all conditions. You know, many times the thing that has us be impatient or force or control is that underneath all of that, we are trying to feel safe in some way for ourselves, for our loved ones. And this journey of being is an opportunity to start to discover that we actually already are safe and to find an internally referenced source of safety within, because it cannot be found in the outer world through controlling it. We do that because we don't know any better, but our safety lies within. Once we nurture the safety, more becomes available to us.
Oh, Sonia, so much good stuff here. So much. And we need to wrap this up here. And I know that there are going to be people who want more from you. So let's tell them the very best way that they can get in touch with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I think the easiest way is to just go to my website, which is surpassyourlimits.com. And you can contact me there. You can check out, things to learn from, resources, everything is there. So that's probably the easiest way.
That's great. And I love the name, Surpass Your Limits. Now, if that doesn't speak to you, I don't know what will. Sonia, thank you so much for bringing your beautiful energy to us today and for sharing how important it is for us to become what we were created to be, human beings. I love this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Maria. It's been a real joy and a real pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. And for everyone who is watching and listening, I want to thank you for being a part of this community. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, comment, share, click a star. Let us know what you thought about it. And as I said at the top of the show, I love to create and share resources for women. And as a career and life coach myself, I work with women to help them navigate challenging times more quickly and gracefully. So if something in this episode resonated with you and you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out. Let's talk about it. The links to connect with Sonia and I are below, as I said before, and there's a special link for you if you would like to continue this conversation in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. Click the link and join us there. So I'll meet you here every Wednesday, like always. So join us again. Until next time, I believe it is our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.